Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today I'm going to do a reel by request. If you own a Daiwa 4000C, which is the Silver Series, the older classic model, if you're thinking about buying one, or if you just want to know how this one works and how to do basic spinning reel service, we're going to go ahead and do that. This is mid-range, just a little bit larger in the fishing categories. It would be used for deep sea fishing or deep lakes or Great Lakes and the like. And this reel is in good condition other than missing a little badge that identifies it here. That's not too uncommon, and it certainly doesn't affect the performance of a reel. So let me get started with this. I'll show you the basic maintenance behind it. This is a reel I've worked on before, but the purpose of this video was a request to show you how to do this. So let's go ahead and do this. This is a nice reel. It's a classic model. It's no longer in production. But it is a workhorse that's lasted a long time and will last a long time if you properly service it. The first thing I do is remove the handle. I like to put the handle nut right back on there. This is a through handle, and it has a screw that pulls that handle through and pulls it tight on the main gear shaft. So that goes into a parts bucket. I recommend everybody have a parts tray. This is a fast food container. I've also been known to use bottoms of milk jugs or just about anything else that can hold the small parts. I like to recommend doing that so that you know where the parts are when you go to reassemble the reel. This reel has two bearings. It has a bearing on the handle side of the main gear if you're cranking lefty, and it has a bearing up on the pinion gear. We'll show you how to gain access to those and how to service those. So first thing to do is take the side plate off after you remove the handle. Those are held on by Phillips head screws. I use a manual screwdriver if you lack dexterity, or if you like the battery operated screwdrivers, go right ahead and do that. Just watch the torque on them during reassemble. You don't want to strip these out and make it problematic for you in terms of getting the reel sealed against salt water. So there's only 3 of these. Screws, not that much to do in terms of using a manual screwdriver to do that. Okay, you have an anti-reverse toggle here. I always put the anti-reverse toggle to the back so that I can remove that side plate. And this, now you'll see the access to the internal gearing here. This has a pretty large main gear to it. It has the 2 ball bearings. One of them rides on the collar here next to the main gear. The other one is up on the spool shaft. And let's continue to do the servicing here. To do that, you want to remove the spool shaft so that you can take the main gear out. To do that, there's a screw on the cross-wind mechanism, the block. It's also a Phillips head screw, so we're going to go ahead and remove that. That's going to go into the parts tray. And then once I have that, you can put your finger on that cross block and then simply pull up, and you've removed the spool assembly. You don't need to take the spool off in order to do that. We will take the spool off later. I'll show you how to service the drags in this. Okay, once that's done, you can simply pull the main gear out. And when you pull the main gear out, you want to check all of the teeth to make sure that nothing's unusual, that they have been ground down. To do that, you look this way, you run your finger over it, it'll tell you abnormalities. The second thing you do is you look at the teeth this way to make sure that there's no imperfections there. That's good. And then you want to check the secondary gear, the one that drives the cross-wind gear, and do the same thing. Make sure that they're all in place there. A lot of times your spool won't be going up and down, and one of the reasons is a tooth will be knocked off of here, and it won't work. And you'll notice there's a space between here on that main gear, and that's why we had to remove that shaft. If you tried to pull this shaft out with this, you wouldn't have the clearance. So that's why you need to take this out before you remove your main gear. Otherwise, you're going to pull something and break something there. Okay, this one is in good shape. All this one requires is a little bit of oil. I use Relax on the bearing, just a dab, just to keep it running. And then on the back end, this one's, like I said, I've worked on this reel before, so I know that it's been lubed. But for purposes of showing this work, I use a blue grease, and that goes on the bushing in the back. It's just a brass bushing. And then I like to put a little bit of blue grease on the pinion gear that the spool shaft rides in as well. So just a little bit. I find that one of the causes for reels breaking is not enough lubrication. Second is too much lubrication. So too much lubrication tends to bog down the reel, and it also causes the reel to accumulate and hold sand and particulate matter, and that causes a problem in terms of wear. Okay, so we just removed the cross-wind gear and the cross-wind block. It sits on a stub on the back of the reel. Again, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to check to make sure all the teeth are there. In this case, this one's well lubed. I'm not going to go do that, but if you needed to, you could put some blue grease on that stud and make sure that it's on the track as well. Sometimes when you're doing reels, this one's not one of them, but sometimes you're doing reels, this crosswind gear will be held in by a screw, which goes in the block in the back there. In this case, it's not. When I reset my crosswind gear, I like to keep the stud on the bottom down because the crosswind block has a indentation for that. And when you run that crosswind block down below, it makes it easier to reassemble your spool gear, giving you the clearance against the main gear. So I'm going to go set that main gear back in. It's simply the idea of pushing through, making sure the teeth are engaged with the spool gear up top, and then working that off. Okay, so with that, we're going to go up top then, and we're going to service that part of it. This is a nut that holds the rotor on. It's a traditional threading, so it can be counterclockwise to remove it, and then that whole assembly pulls off. I check underneath. There is a little bit of varnishing going on there, so I'm going to take WD-40 and a little scrubby pad, and that should help clear that up. And it does. It just cleans that right out there. If it was a little bit more stubborn, you could use a steel wool, but in this case, the household scrubby does fine. All right, we're clear there. I'm going to go up top. Now, if you wanted to replace the rotor, or if you had a bad bearing here that you kept hearing, you would remove these 3 Phillips head screws, and this whole assembly just pulls right out. In this case, this is in good condition, and as I said, I've worked on this reel in the past. I'm not going to go do that. The maintenance required here is just a simple drop of oil on the bearing. And again, moderation, don't go crazy with the oils. And then I like to put a drop of oil on the anti-reverse tog. That dog, you want to check for operation. This one's doing fine. When you go to reassemble the spool rotor, you want to make sure that it's disengaged. So again, that's in, and if you're trying to put it on with that in, it's not going to seat properly, so make sure it's moved out here. And if you really didn't want to take the rotor off, you could actually come in underneath here and put a drop of oil there and just hold the reel down for a little bit, and that would get into the bearing as well. So I've backed this off. We're going to reassemble the rotor. Once you have the clearance, we're going to go put that cap nut back on. And again, that's a clockwise turn. There we go. And I like an offset wrench. I have an offset wrench here because there is a lip on the rotors. Almost all fishing reels, it has that lip, and that offset wrench just makes it nice and easy. Gives you plenty of clearance as you go to turn the screw. Okay, so then what we need to do then is reinsert the spool. The shaft comes in, and remember we left that crosswind block low. So that enables us to have plenty of clearance between the crosswind block and resetting that spool shaft. If you put it up top, you're going to have trouble accessing it. And if you don't do it right the first time, you have to reset it, and that causes you some delays there. Okay, so we're ready to seal up the bottom of this reel then. Everything's been lubed, either in terms of using the blue grease or in terms of using the reel oil. And now all we have to do is put those 3 side plate screws in there. And once we finish that, we'll move up top and I'll show you how to service the drags on this reel. Okay, so again, if you have a mechanical or a battery-powered screwdriver, that's fine in terms of driving these in, but just watch the torque, especially towards the end. These are metal frames. They're not graphite frames on this reel. There's little give in that. You risk either breaking a screw, tightening too much may push the side plate out of true and cause a little bit of a grind, or in worst case, maybe it could crack it. So, so just, you know, if you have the time, I'd prefer the manual screwdriver, but again, if you don't have the dexterity or if you want to move along with a battery-powered one, that's fine. Okay, now we take the nut off the handle assembly, put that in, reassemble on the other side, the bushing side. In this case, these handles are interchangeable, so if you want to crank with your right hand as opposed to the traditional left hand setup, you can go ahead and do that. Okay, and then I'll just do a quick turn to make sure it's operating properly. Again, remember I had that anti-reverse dog off when I put that rotor back on. Now that's back on. So let's move up top and I'll show you how to finish this reel by servicing the drags. So in order to do that, you counterclockwise to remove the drag knob. And this procedure is going to hold for almost all reels. On the most of these reels have a tie-down clip that rides in a groove, and then underneath the groove is the drags. So, and then depending on which drags you have, if you have a Teflon drag, it's simple cleaning. If you have a felt drag, a felt washer, you're going to do a little bit more. Okay, there's the hold down clamp. I'm going to put that in the parts bucket so we know where to look for it. And then we're going to pull these out. And in this case, it looks like I've got Teflon washers here. Okay, so it looks like I got a combination of washers here. That's kind of interesting. And these have been pressed a little bit tight, so they need to be cleaned. This is always time for a good tip, and one of the tips on this is to back your drag knob off if you're not using the reel, because if you've got this lubricated and you leave that pressed in there and the lubrication dries, it tends to kind of form like a glue or a concrete mesh kind of a thing that you don't want to get done. All right, there's some junk in there, so I'm going to use a paper towel first. See if I can't clear it out with that. And I can, so that's good. All right, and then I'm going to wipe down these drags. And these are Teflon drags, so they don't require the lubrication, but there is accumulated deposits on here from probably the seawater or whatever kind of got on the reel. So just want to make sure that those are clean. And you can tell I'm kind of shuffling up these, but I know how this series goes, so you don't. So let's go through that. There's a fabric washer, a metal washer, in this case a Teflon. Then we have an eared washer which has 2 points on it that goes in the grooves here. That always sits in the middle of the drag stack. And we have the 2 top washers, and then on top of that is that clip I was showing you. So let's go reassemble. In this case, because that is a fabric washer, I'm going to use a drag grease on that one. In this case, I'll use Cal's drag grease. There's others on the market, but I find this one performs very well. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and just a little bit on both sides, just to provide the lubrication needed to keep those drags flexible. Okay, and then we start by reassembling that by putting that in the first one down in the hole. The metal gear goes in next. Now these have got the D shape to them because that's the way the shaft is. So when I go to realign these 2 top ones, I try to make sure that they're in the same positioning. You can always work it on the shaft. It's not that hard when you release the drags. Okay, then we put a Teflon washer in. Doesn't matter which one of those. And then this is the eared washer. This one goes in the middle of the stack. Teflon one goes up top. And I remember that I have my D going kind of north there, so I'm going to go put that. That's pretty close there. And then we reinstall this clip. Now, this is a spring clip, so I always suggest that you kind of keep your hand on it because it can shoot out if you're not in the drag as you in that groove as you go to apply tension. It's kind of what's happening here. It wants to fight me, but it's in now. And then we'll take reassembly to the spool. And again, it's a D-shaped spool, so you got to work till you get that flat spot lined up with those washers. We reinstall that drag knob. I'll test it for operation. Do that by spinning first, then tightening until you feel the right tension that you want. And it's getting tighter now. It's just about, and then full tighten where the spool doesn't move. And then I generally back it off a little bit. If you got a reel this size, you're probably going for big fish. You probably don't want the drags fully engaged. Okay, and then we turn. Just one more thing, check the bail assembly. That works fine. It's the old hammer kind of assembly where the back of the bail hits that hammer to flip it. And we're in good shape. So for the special request, I hope that's helped you. If you have a 4000C, even though you didn't request it, hopefully that's helped show you how to repair and lube this reel. And if you're considering buying one, boy, I'll tell you what, if you can find it at the right price and modestly priced, this reel will last you a long time just with those simple service steps that we did. So this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. I've been doing this for about 20 years now. I welcome your comments. If you liked the video, please like it on at the end of this video. If you'd like to see more of these, please subscribe, and you'll see the reels that I'm working on a regular basis. Thanks again for watching.